Off top, apparently, if you put Viagra in a flower vase, it'll make the flower stay up longer. Play the music.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.
All right, welcome to the Domonique Foxworth Show. I have a special surprise before we get into our special guest, Gojo. I need y'all to watch this.
I feel like winning the Super Bowl is like kind of an ick. Like, okay, don't be the best. It's kind of gross.
It's like, oh, you beat up all the other boys. People are like, how could he yell at his old coach in his face?
Yeah.
This is a man who the testosterone levels are so high that his brain cells are fully just zapped. And for a living, he gets pushed around and hit in the head. He's a human gladiator. The fact that he didn't beat the out of his coach is actually a miracle.
If a woman shows an emotion at all, specifically while doing her craft or like whatever, it'd be like, this is why women don't run the country. I mean, you're so emotional. I mean, that's crazy. But he did it and they were like, oh, he's just passionate about his sport.
Also, imagine if Taylor Swift sing Viva Las Vegas when she won Album of the Year. Everyone would be like, this is a medical emergency. Visiting hours are over. Bring her back to the ward.
I need to ask off of that, is that the best Super Bowl analysis you've heard in the last week?
I want to know everything about the Giggly Squad now. What a phenomenal synopsis of the sport.
So I'm just whipping through my TikTok, and it pops up on my thing, and I thought it was funny, so I sent it to Charlie. Apparently, these are people that I should know. They're like famous or people that other people know. I just thought it was some like quirky girls who made me laugh because they're right.
Yep. So they have a great podcast, but they both come from Summer House on Bravo.
Oh,
They're cast members.
Oh.
And I've talked about this. Eventually, I will be at a Summer House party as an extra in the background. It will happen.
I've always found it interesting. Like football is like a very uniquely American thing. And I've told you guys before, like at business school, it's like a bunch of international people. And it's like the first time when people get their first experience of football, listening to them talk about it is really great. It's not the best because you don't want to be
so bad,
but it's close to the best.
Being the best is such a huge ick, which, by the way, like, what a healthy way to look at it. It's like, you don't have to be the best in anything. In fact, that might be too much. That's overwhelming. But no, I had the same experience you're talking about, Domonique. Humble brag, we had Thierry Henry and a lot of the Champions League coverage crew from CBS on the show. But talking to them about what their experience around Radio Row and the Super Bowl was fascinating because Thierry is more famous than pretty much everyone we had there. And he was still like, I grew up with a Raiders starter jacket, and that was my introduction to football, was them and watching the Giants. Like, it's just fascinating to see how different people come to this and then how they experience it and regurgitate it back.
The tough thing about it is you can't help but realize how stupid it is when people are explaining it to you. And that was my experience where they're like, so you got 4 down. What's a down? Why do you have 4 downs? And then it's like, why do you have to stop and talk between plays? And I'm kind of like, yeah, this is dumb. But you know what? I regain my superiority when I tell them to throw something. Because that's the thing that I've learned about a lot of like international athletes, and they're like good athletes at their own sports or whatever.
Sweet feet.
The thing that you don't realize is like football and baseball are like pretty like American. They're played in other places, but it's very like local to America. I understand, like at least it's like it excludes Europe to a degree, you know?
Yes.
So like there's like Asian countries and like South American countries that participate in baseball, but Europe is not really into it. So like the European guys would come over and like talk about football, ask them fools to throw something. They get real, they're a lot less tough there. Or ask them to catch something. If they don't have to use their feet, they look real uncoordinated. Us Americans, we grow up throwing and catching.
They did that with, I forget which Formula One driver it was, but they had him and Tyreek Hill doing this reaction thing where one would hold the tennis balls up top and the other would move their hands. And the whole thing was to show how the Formula One driver actually was reacting quicker than Tyreek Hill. And I forget if it was Derek Klassen or somebody that quote tweeted was like, all right, well, now ask him to go and catch something and then dodge a 250-pound guy that's trying to destroy him and end his life, and then see how well it works out for him.
Oh, gosh. I love it. But anyway, the Giggly Squad is Now they're probably, so it's a weird thing. As we talked about this Super Bowl, a lot of people have been talking about how Taylor Swift's appearance in the Super Bowl has brought a whole different fan base to football.
Not me and Gojo.
Yeah, not you, Gojo. You are her fans and also football fans. But I feel like because of their interest in football, it might bring a bunch of this weird football fans, because my TikTok algorithm would never have shown me the Giggly Squad, because the Giggly Squad wouldn't be talking about football. I'm assuming wouldn't be talking about football if it weren't for the fact that this Super Bowl was a uniquely, I don't know, suburban white women's Super Bowl.
This is the Super Bowl that brunched.
Oh, there we go. That's a,
yeah.
See,
this
that's
Super Bowl hit bottomless mimosas and is catching buzz at just the right time. Someone might jump up on a chair soon and start throwing some. It's gonna be fun.
Ooh, throwing. All right, so here we go. I got a question to get us back on track, and I mean, will never lose my cool, but to regain some cool for both of you, Texas Hold'em or 16 Carriages? Go, Joe. Pick one. Go.
So I've only listened to a bit of 16 Carriages because I didn't realize we got a second track. I can't get enough.
16 is the right answer.
I can't get enough of Texas Hold'em, though. I take a little walk down by the beach every day after I get done with our show in the morning, and I'm just walking around. You know where it's like all those memes of people, it's like me driving to my 9 to 5 job listening to gangster rap. It's me bopping down the beach listening to Texas Hold'em, just having the best time of my life, waving at people's dogs. I love that song.
Waving, it's perfect.
I will say, like, I try to be progressive, man, and every now and then a music video pops up. Like, nope, you are a Lane Johnson looking troglodyte, simple human being.
That's right.
Because maybe the reason I don't like 16, or I don't like Texas Hold'em nearly as much as like 16 Candles, is that video is distracting. Pick one, Charlie. Which one?
Texas Hold'em.
All right.
All right. So I got a game for you guys. You guys are football savants, knowledgeable football people. The game is called Signal or Noise. We're going to look back at the entire NFL season, and we're going to look at some specific events, and I'm going to ask you, is this just noise that we talked about that doesn't really indicate something moving forward, or is this a signal of things to come?
Okay.
And what it means. The first one, the best offenses are based on yak, yards after the catch, rather than driving the ball downfield. This is because if you look at the 49ers and the Chiefs, they are teams that are yak based. They don't have the X driving the ball down the field. Of course, you have Patrick Mahomes, but the way defenses have played him, they've moved their safeties back. They forced him to take what the defense is giving him. So is this a sign of things to come, or is this just noise?
I think it's just noise. And this is directly attacks one of my aphorisms about football is you need a deep threat. Like, I think every team needs a true number one deep threat to scare you. And it's connected to my bias as a cornerback, but I have a hard time believing that this is the way that we're going to go. And this is like for these two teams, they're uniquely designed. So like the yak is a reaction for the Chiefs to the way that people are covering them. And the yak for this 49ers is just how this offense has been developed over the years of having like average to below average quarterbacks and highly talented skill players. I'm not sure that, and I guess I should check this while Gojo responds, but I'm not sure that the Dolphins or that the rest of the offenses in the league, their numbers are as yak heavy as the top two teams at the end. What do you think, Gojo?
Yeah, I would say it's noise mostly because so much of this is always, and I think football is so unique in that you're always at the mercy of your resources a lot more so than the other sports, just because there's more parts involved. And so based on a salary cap sport where there's this influx of different talented bodies every year, you're always trying to make use of that. And so when the Chiefs did start getting played differently, large part because of Tyreek Hill and the way that people were responding to big play offenses, now you've had that happen. Eventually, with what we've also seen become a trend around the league, which is a lot of really competent run games dominating their way through the postseason because boxes got lighter, because more so the resources started going towards the back end. Eventually, that's going to course correct because the easiest way to get beat is when you can't stop. We saw it all playoff. It's the oldest cliche in football. but there's only so much of that D coordinators are going to take before bigger bodies and more bodies start to flood their way back into the box, and then you're going to get more of those favorable matchups back.
Yeah, those ebbs and flows happen in football all the time, and people reacted to them. It's important to be on the cutting edge of that before you get cut. If you're a follower in that, it's going to be too late once you switch. But I think what jumps out to me for both of these two teams in the Super Bowl, and I guess even you throw the Lions in there too, and probably I guess you could argue the Ravens also, because I've talked about the number one receiver. And none of these teams, I guess Hollywood, or not Hollywood, that was the time they tried it before. But yeah, there's really no like true number one in the bunch, which is something I've always believed that you had to have.
Well, I also think part of this is we're assuming that, like with all these guys, we're talking about some of the best play callers in the NFL and some of the best play designers in the NFL. And we're assuming that that's something that's accessible to everybody. A lot of places are dealing with coordinators that aren't nearly as talented. And so what's a much easier way to offset that? By having a dog wide receiver who can go out there and burn everyone else and asking him to be the one that affects the defense, not the coach being the one that with the structure of the offense affects the defense.
Well, and that's what I wondered about the Dolphins are a really interesting example of this. Elite play caller, bad offensive line who they're able to mask by getting the ball out as quickly as possible. But the Dolphins were 4th in yak per completion.
Yeah. Yeah, I think their yak is different, though. When you think of yak per completion, you think of short passes that someone turns into something big. Yeah. I have a laundry list in my mind of passes where Tyreek Hill catches it at 20 yards down the field, and then it turns it into 40. Their yak is different. So it feels like it's not like turning 4 into 12 as much as for them it's turning 20 into 30 a bunch of times.
The reason I brought up the Dolphins because I wonder if this is indicative because you looked this up before the show, and the offensive lines were rated not as highly by PFF for the Chiefs and the 49ers. In this new modern NFL, can yak in certain ways not just mask flaws with your receiver room, but also with your offensive line? Because I do think that's a huge thing of what the Dolphins did. They got the ball out quicker than anyone.
Yeah, I think there's all yak isn't created equal, and I think there's like Debo yak, which is often the hardest to get in my view, where it's like screen pass, is short swing, is a dig that he turns into something like they're actual broken tackles, which is different than scheme yak, which I think you get a lot of with I think of the Lions as a team that schemes up open plays to get yak. So I think the scheme ones are, I guess that all of it can be in your mind, but the scheme ones, very much like the Dolphins, those seem like they could be hedges against your offensive line, or in that case, hedges to protect your quarterback. But I just have a hard time imagining that. And I think as I look at the list of the people with the players with the top yak, it is Tyreek Hill, CeeDee Lamb, we got Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice. Yeah, it's a lot of the best offenses in football. But I guess fundamentally, I'm trying to find a way to make sure that I'm not wrong in my wide receivers thing. So I'll let Gojo talk before I come to my final conclusion.
No, I think ultimately you're right. Like, I don't know. And I think we think of like go balls as the only like deep option. Like, think about how many seams Tyreek Hill has destroyed up the field where all of a sudden the yak comes after that, or you find this area in the middle of the field. Like, it doesn't necessarily register the same. And Domonique, I've heard you talk about it, how a number one wide receiver bends the field a certain way based on how a defense has to allocate resources. And in my head, like I've always said to you, DB play and O-line play are very similar. So I look at wide receivers and pass rushers the same way, where when you've got a marquee pass rusher, it changes the way that you've got to account resources up front on each and every play, which feeds into Charlie's point, which is I do think some of this is, hey, it's an admission that we know where our flaws are. Like with the Kansas City Chiefs, tackle was an issue this year. You had trouble with that, and so you had to respond, and Patrick Mahomes knew this as well as Andy did, by getting the ball out faster, because you're only going to have so much time if you're compromised in these areas, because we had to allocate resources accordingly because we had to pay our quarterback. And with the Dolphins, some of that was injury-based. Like, hey, we were a meat grinder up front. We had too many bodies coming through, so we got to make sure that we plug this hole by getting the ball out on time and giving our quarterback a chance to get the playoff, let alone be successful.
You nailed it. And one of the shocking things about this season is that I think a PFF list that I looked at today had the Chiefs at 19 and the 49ers at 21 as far as best offensive lines in football, which I'd always kind of believe like that's where I start. And I think you led us to a point that I think is where I wanted to end up. Is I'm not sure that what I believe is that you need to have a number one receiver. That's like a shorthand way of saying, and it's exactly what you're saying, is I want a dude that people are afraid of. And that's why your D-line comparison is perfect. As a coordinator, if I'm an offensive or defensive coordinator, I want someone who his just mere presence requires that you, as a coordinator on the other side, that you adjust to that. And so there are things in your playbook that you can't even call. If I got Tyreek Hill, there are things that you can't even call. And I think for both of these teams, they have some of that in different ways. And Christian McCaffrey is that guy where you'll rarely see a light box on first down because Christian's there. And because of that, that opens up other things. So more than just the number one receiver. And I think because I'm a cornerback and because big plays scare the hell out of me, that's what I think. But more than anything, I want a queen, like to use a chess analogy. I just want a queen out there that when I move that player, you all are aware that I'm moving them. When I run it to that player or hand it to that player, or throw it to the player, and I know that because he's out there, you are going to be hesitant to do any of the wild stuff that you want to do. So whoever that player is, and I guess for the Chiefs, I don't know. I guess it's Travis Kelce, but no, Travis Kelce doesn't break defenses like that anymore. I don't know that they have one. They might break the rule, but what they do have is a quarterback, which seems unique, where you take away the deep passes, he's going to hit the middle area. If you take away the deep passes in the middle area, he'll just run it. So it's like it's a tough spot when you have someone that smart. But I'm willing to say that the Chiefs are the exception to this rule that I'm making, where I want, and again, like you said, defense too. Like I want a corner that y'all are like, all right, we can't throw over there. Or a D lineman is like, we can't leave him in one-on-one. I need that. That's going to make my life easier as a coordinator.
I'll let Charlie move us along if we're running long on this particular question.
Don't worry about it.
On this, John Danowski is the head lacrosse coach at Duke, and he coined the best term for what you're talking about that I ever heard. Is he always said, offensively, I need a party starter. I need the guy that can initiate offense and beat his one-on-one matchup to force the rest of the defense to adjust and bend to his will.
So I have two questions coming off of that, because one of the things that just popped in my mind when you guys were talking about, because I think we should get to the QB evals and how this changes with the way defenses are going to play them now. But we used to see contested catch receivers. Like DeAndre Hopkins is sort of like the last of his kind. He's not that fast. He doesn't really get open, but he makes plays to move the sticks. Are those guys going to be the ones who are replaced as these pseudo number one receivers by guys who can get open in space and get yak, the Puka Nakuas, the Cooper Kupps, et cetera, Amon-Ra St. Browns?
I never liked those guys. Yeah. I mean, I never liked those guys. I loved playing against those guys, but I never liked them as an offensive player. And it's like the game, that guy is an evolution on the dude that'll go across the middle. We don't need dude that is willing to go across the middle anymore because the rules have changed. So like the tough physical guy, they have their place, and maybe this is my own bias again creeping in. I don't feel like we need the game plan for the dude that's going to get open and catch a 7-yard, 10-yard, or it's not going to get open and is going to catch contested chain movers. We don't have the game plan for that. So that doesn't scare me as a defensive player.
I think it's so interesting. I feel like we're just like Rosetta Stone right now, because I'm just going to translate this into front seven language so I can understand it. But that sounds like a run stuffing D tackle, right? Like Mike Pennell was great in the Super Bowl. I don't have to change what I'm doing for that guy. I know how to block him. I know where he's going to be, but nothing about his game scares me. It's effective. But when you get those guys, it's like the difference between facing that and Aaron Donald, where every play I'm holding on to my figuring out who's going to come help me. And I don't live with that same like healthy fear of that guy you're blocking when it's that case. So I don't think it's going to be an outright replacement, Charlie, to answer your question there. Like, I don't think it becomes or replaces the value, but it's always going to have a place in football, I guess.
If you accept my premise that those are just evolutions on the possession receiver, go over the middle receiver, they had a lot more value when you needed someone to go to the middle to force teams to defend the middle of the field. Now there's no fear of going over the middle. Like, you can run a dig with whomever. And so as long as we can threaten the middle of the field in some sort of way, that's all we need to do, is to be able to plausibly, and I think the Ravens did the best job all year long of any team of threatening every area of the field. They didn't do it as well in the playoffs, but in the course of a game, watching them, their coach and their players just like run jet sweeps, run inside zone, like in the course of one series, run a deep out on both sides, attack on post down the middle field, hit the tight end. You watch one drive, you're like, damn, all right, they just did everything. Where are we going to shift the help? I don't know. And then Lamar scrambles for 10 yards too, and you just feel like there is no hope unless you have Patrick Mahomes.
So what you're talking about is I think what's at the center of so much of offense now and in general is you got to present a lot of options. And the one thing that I would say for the possession type receiver now is I think we most often associate them with being guys that are willing to go up and mix it in and blocking. It's the thing that's most impressive to me about all the Shanahan McVay coaching trees is they all put such premium on wide receivers. Like we talk like the big slot as like a wide receiver type where you're willing to get down in the box and all these condensed formations that help them in so many ways and get to a lot of the pin and pull runs that we saw, especially this postseason against the 49ers. A lot of that dirty work in the box that is what makes these like heavily 11 personnel reliant run games be able to work is you've got a guy who, maybe before he was the contested catch across the middle guy. Now he's, hey, I can give you a contested catch in traffic, but I'm also going to mix it up in this other way that's become increasingly more valuable in a lot of these schemes.
The yards after catches. I mean, it's really just being about afraid of big plays. Big plays crush you.
All right, let's pivot from wide receivers to quarterbacks. The position that coming off that game that we just saw in the Super Bowl a week ago, we know having a dude matters. How you get the dude? That's what I want to know if it's signal or noise. Because Aaron Rodgers, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, who got outplayed by Joe Flacco, who was on the couch 2 weeks before the playoffs. My question to you guys, is it a signal or noise that big quarterback acquisitions do not work?
So that's a tough one. I would like to say that it's noise. Or no, it's a signal. Yeah, I think that's it. It's a signal. I don't love the big quarterback acquisitions. I think that quarterback acquisition is fine, but let's go to the thrift store. Let's see what they got, what that Mayfield hitting on. I'm not trying to go overpay for a top level quarterback. I know we got the example of Tom Brady, but Tom Brady is the discount king.
Matt Stafford.
And Matt Stafford is the example, the pushback. But these seem like these quarterbacks aren't available that often. What it's going to cost you. I guess the Rams is the perfect example of how to do it because you would think that it's going to cost you a lot to make the trade. The capital going forward, but the Rams have been able to bounce back pretty quickly. But I don't know. I need some more time to think. So say something, Gojo.
I like how you're like, we don't need that Aaron Rodgers. We got Baker Mayfield at home. All right.
That's really dumb when you put it that way. But Baker Mayfield had a much better season than Aaron Rodgers.
Well, he did, but like, I don't know. To me, this is noise because most of the samples we're talking about are either incomplete or so wildly different in their entry point. Like Deshaun Watson, we have no purview for a player that missed as much time for the reasons that he did in the middle of what was a prolific career on the field and how that can affect things. Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles 4 plays into his Jets tenure. And so I'm kind of leaving that one to be determined until we see him on the field for a majority of this season, understanding that injury with an older player is something you have to build into the model when you make that kind of acquisition. Russell Wilson also gets thrown in there, but I guess it always points back to the same thing for me, which is the environment that you've built around those players and that you're bringing them into matters so much. And so when you've got Sean McVay or when you had Bruce Arians and you had the rosters built up around those guys in those spots, and the quarterbacks coming in from their very specific situations, it can still work and make sense. But it's a reminder that, like everything else, drafting a quarterback, none of it's foolproof.
All right, guys, I have a theory. My theory is it is a signal, but not a signal that acquiring a good quarterback is not a good thing. Obviously, that's a good thing. We know you need a dude. My theory is that this is like that really hot person, that's single and has been single forever. And you're like, why? Something has to be wrong with this. What's up with this lemon? So when you're calling a team and you're like, hey, can I have your 2-time MVP Aaron Rodgers? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, take him. Can I have Russell Wilson? No, he'll never do high knees down the aisle of an airplane. He'll never kiss any babies and shake hands. Or Deshaun Watson. And the Texans are like, yes, please, anything.
Young too.
That's usually a sign that the signal is if your star quarterback's available, they're not really the star quarterback you want to acquire.
Yeah. I mean, I guess the argument, well, I guess this supports your argument because I would say that Matt Stafford has been different, but Matt Stafford wasn't that situation. It was more like he was coming to the end of the career, and the Lions, Matt Stafford and Sean McVay kind of orchestrated this and then involved the teams, right? And then the Lions like, sure, we'll move on from it, right? That still supports your theory. The other time, I guess Peyton Manning would go back pretty far, and he was bad one year after he was good one year.
And he had a neckiotomy.
Right. Had a neckiotomy, and luck was available. And then there's the Tom Brady situation where they didn't have to pay that much. Like,
he's a free agent.
Yeah, I know they didn't have to pay that much to him either, personally. Like, it wasn't a commitment, same level of commitment. So I think your theory is an interesting one. Yeah, people don't move on from good quarterbacks, but
I mean, we almost saw it with Lamar, though. Like, that almost got way weirder than it normally does with a quarterback of his caliber.
Right. Do we believe that?
Yeah.
Or was it just so you think that the Ravens, because they would have had a chance to match the deal, right?
Oh, I think they would have probably matched it. I thought you were going to say, do you believe there was collusion that a team didn't go after him?
Oh, no. I just mean, do you believe that they were actually ready to move on from him?
I don't, but I also, like, I think our whole point is, like, when you know you've got something special, you usually don't even risk it. And there was risk built in. There are things that another team could have in theory done that would have made it very difficult for the Baltimore Ravens to go about doing that. Where I'm with you. Overall, do I think they were really serious about letting him walk? Absolutely not. But they opened it up to a possibility more so than it happens with a guy who goes on to win the MVP the following season.
You know what I think, to your point, Gojo, I think they were serious if he was only going to take more guaranteed money than Deshaun Watson. And I think that all the owners around the league looked at that contract and were like, this is a bleeping joke. We're not giving our quarterbacks this contract. Whatever we think about that, if that's right or wrong, I think that's how they viewed it. And once he softened it to the point you've made a million times, Domonique, he's going to get all the money.
Yeah.
He's getting every dollar that's in his contract, but it's not going to be written out in a way that they have to put it all in escrow the second he signs the dotted line.
Yeah. What about my Gojo made a fool of my let me go thrift shopping idea, but what about that? What if there are, quarterbacks? I think that's what I'd be looking for more than anything, because it's more likely it's guys who have talent and you could plausibly suggest that there were other things that got in the way of them having success, and guys that the expectations would be low for, and you're asking, I guess the thing that we do every year is we pick a couple teams, we say they're a quarterback away. And I think more than anything, the signal in all this is there's no such thing. I don't know that I believe in that anymore, because we haven't really seen anybody who we thought was a quarterback away get a quarterback and then it actually turned into something, right? Am I misremembering it? But who was the team? The Rams, the one, it's quarterback away. The Bucks, quarterback away. No other of these teams that we thought were quarterback away added a quarterback and actually got better.
I think it depends if you're saying if you acquired them via trade or free agency. But if you look at the guys who are acquired traditionally through the draft, like you look at what CJ Stroud did, you look at the way Joe Burrow is like a program changer, like guys like that. If you get a dude,
so that's not
I'm just
fair.
saying, but it's still like you are a quarterback away. A lot of these rosters are.
We're talking about a different type of team. Yeah. Everybody is a superstar away. Yeah, like a future Hall of Famer away. Yeah, sure. That's every team in football. Future Hall of Fame quarterback. Yeah, you're that guy away. I mean, the whole concept of having teams that, like the Jets are the example, teams that we assume as a quarterback away. I don't know that I believe that that's a thing, which it may be case by case, but I don't know that I believe it's a thing. We haven't really seen it work.
I guess in that way, you could talk me into this being a signal in that we have to be more cognizant. Like, we thought it was a signal that, oh, we're going to see this as a pattern. Clearly, Copycat League took over and everyone was like, all right, if you've got this great roster, then you just need to go pull one guy. I mean, hell, the 49ers, Kyle Shanahan admitted they were trying to coax Brady out of retirement. When they thought Brock Purdy wasn't going to be ready for week 1. So it was that copycat-ish. And now we're seeing, it might require a real more specific set of circumstances than you're going to encounter in a given offseason. So maybe you're better off getting a Baker Mayfield and then waiting until you can get to a point where you do find a dude that becomes available.
I think we just learn that acquiring a normal quarterback's not like acquiring Tom Brady and Peyton Manning.
Yeah,
we went all of that to come to 2 of the 5 best guys ever.
Yeah, and Matt Stafford. Yeah, that was Next question.
All right, last one. I want to talk about, is this signal or noise that the Eagles' brain drain is going to change who they are materially as a team? They did go 10-1 to start the year, but they had a series of 1-possession wins that sort of inflated the raw wins total compared to what the nerds were telling us how good they were, and masked the scheme issues that occurred when they lost Jonathan Gannon, pew pew pew, and Sykin.
Yeah, I mean, I think for the Eagles, but I think broader, the thing is, the signal that I want to remember from this is we have to believe what they show us.
Mm-hmm.
And I always say this every year, but I can't fully internalize it, is that you don't get to bring stuff from the previous season. And like, the Eagles were winning close games, and we all were like making the joke that, hey, it's just like the Vikings, but we were all like laughing, like, no, but they're better than the Vikings, because we saw what they were capable of. Like, no, this is a different team. And whether it's because of coaching brain drain or some other commitment to preparation or strategy or something else changed, you just have to understand that the circumstances from season to season are very different, even if the roster is very similar. And also, the circumstances from the beginning of the season to the end of the season are different. So while we can carry some piece of who this team was forward, you have to look at the sample that they give you now, because the Eagles were the same bad team all season long. They got worse, but they were the same, like, mediocre is probably fair, team all season long, and we were not willing to accept it until they were completely terrible and couldn't tackle anybody.
Yeah, I think I'll say it is a signal, but like, to Dominique's point, it's complicated because we also know part of this was roster decisions. It was decisions they made about the value of certain positions that affected this. But I do think that in this league, we've seen, even in places where coaching is stable, there's an importance every year of making sure you develop yourself in a way that is slightly different and recognizes, hey, this is going to be the response to what people did to us last year, or what we did to people last year. And with the Eagles, it felt like they became so reliant on, well, we're just going to out-talent everybody in a very simple scheme after we already showed people all of that. And now they're going to adjust. And there are going to be minor things that change during the course of the year that are going to make us slightly less effective, whether that's a poorly timed injury, whether that's a change in the play call or the voice in the room. And so the Eagles got stagnant at a time where, coming off of being one of the teams that was incredibly exposed, you had the kind of success that they did in that division, in that conference last year. Of course, people were going to spend a lot of bandwidth trying to figure out how to game you the other way.
Yeah, you got to evolve, especially when you're the top dog. It's natural selection. Is the entire league, is not the entire league, but at least people in your division and the teams in your conference. Once you have success, and we saw that with Mahomes, they're going to their team, the players they select, the schemes that they focus on, the strategy that they practice all offseason is going to be geared towards answering the questions that you've posed. And you need to have the next genetic modification to allow you to survive in this new ecosystem.
Yeah,
I love science. It's fun.
Think about the Chiefs. That's why we've lauded them. They're the most they've become the new Patriots, in that they can morph into whatever the situation calls for.
Well, but imagine if the Chiefs had replaced, Eric Bieniemy with Matt Patricia.
Yeah. That's tough. That's tougher. They brought in Nagy, and I mean, they also have Andy very heavily involved in offense also. And
but that's a very different type of coach than,
I mean, why are we talking about their offense when Spags is the one that really is the one that we should be crediting? They kept Spags, who is constantly evolving, and the thing about their defense that is really impressive, it evolves through the course of a season and even a game. And that's, I think, that versatility, multiplicity, offensively and defensively, is something that I think is a value in the modern NFL.
Yeah. I think this is one of the hobby horses that I really do believe is a signal that when you have teams that have these great coordinators who sometimes are even better than the head coaches on that current team, when they leave, it can have these drastic effects. And I know that, like, you could point to the 49ers as masking that because they've lost McDaniel, they've lost D'Amico Ryans, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I still look at that defense and like, that probably would have been a better defense with D'Amico Ryans running it. Like, those edges would have functioned better. And not every coach, like you say, can be Kyle Shanahan, who can run a program that well, or Andy Reid, who can keep institutional stability when they lose those big pieces.
Yeah. Planning for the next step is like being a college coach in some ways, except you're not planning for the next step of players. You're planning for the next step of coordinators and coaches.
That's why I love you, Domonique. I literally was in my head going, this is collegiate. Like that whole model of having a program so holistically built that and it's honestly, it's something I've heard you and I know plenty of others talk about for the challenge for defensive head coaches who are getting these jobs where the fear around the league is always your offensive mind on staff is going to get poached for one of these head jobs. And so you've constantly got to be a step ahead in the planning of how you're going to account for that in building your program out.
Yeah, I agree with that, but I guess I guard against believing that you can consistently have a schematic advantage week to week, no matter how smart you are.
Sure.
And that's tough. I think it's the point we made earlier on in the show is that you need to be able to evolve quickly, because whatever advantage you develop is not going to be sustainable. And it's not just evolve your scheme, it's also evolve your roster. And that's where finding the open space. And that goes back to the point you were making about how the size and athleticism of D linemen change based on what the offense is doing. And if you're the first offense to, once you guys reach that tipping point of, oh, we got all pass rushers up here, you're the first offense to shift to like power rushing. You got a small schematic advantage for whatever time it takes everyone else to catch up. And there's a disadvantage that comes with it. Also, trade-offs, my other favorite terminology. All right. That was fun. Football. Anyway, thank you, Gojo. Unless you got any parting shots, you want to tell us a story about Vegas or what happens in Vegas stays there.
No, I saw you guys at the New Heights party, which I think you guys have talked about on here. Your run-ins with Lane Johnson. I just laughed that in this room full of famous people, I was legitimately the most starstruck to see Kylie and Donna Kelsey. By far.
Same.
And I didn't have the nerve to go up and introduce myself.
You didn't see there was like a Backstreet Boy there too.
Really?
NSYNC.
Oh,
it was Joey Fatone.
Joey Fatone was in the building. I don't know.
That's cool. I was more of a Backstreet Boys guy anyway. And plus, I was by you guys, like blown away by how tall Rasheed Wallace was. Seeing Rasheed Wallace in person in general blew me away just because of when I grew up. But then reminding myself that 6'10" as tall as hell is a real drunken revelation that you can only get on the show.
All right, that just sparked another memory in my mind. I will share that in a second. First of all, thank you, Gojo, for being here. Thank you, Charlie, for producing. Thank you to all the other producers, Megan, Kevin, Brian, Serafina. We miss you, Podville. But also, the thought that I will leave everybody with, a great moment in my life. I got a young blood, keep doing what you're doing, from a very special person. Hall of Famer Bruce Smith sought me out in the club and gave me a strong dap and pulled me in and said, keep doing what you're doing, young blood. Oh, great. Woo! Everybody go away. Have a great day. Have a great week. Goodbye.
This is the Domonique Foxworth Show.